Ambassador, the president again today insisted Iran badly wants to make a deal, saying the U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is working as planned. Do you believe that's true?
Well, right after saying Iran badly wants to make a deal, he said that there's a small problem because we don't know who the leaders are and who's authorized to say that. So I don't know who he thinks he's talking to. In fact, I do think that the Iranian leadership is badly fractured at the top. And I think that's a consequence, obviously, of the 6 weeks of bombing and the number of leaders that have been eliminated. That, to me, is a sign that the collapse of the regime is making progress and that we should go back at it, not talk to them, but continue the job, end the ceasefire, and keep the pressure on. The ceasefire essentially only benefits the regime.
We heard the president say today that the power of the blockade is incredible. It is, in your view, I mean, is the blockade a military action? Because Secretary Hegseth said today that because there's a ceasefire, the president isn't bound by the 60-day deadline to get a congressional approval as required by law, that the 60-day clock, which they are right up against, is paused. Is that your understanding?
No, I don't think so. Look, I think one of the reasons in the Cuban Missile Crisis that the Kennedy administration was so anxious to call what they did to Cuba a quarantine because a blockade would have been an act of war. So maybe what Hegseth means is that we have a quarantine on Iran, which is fine. Of course, Iran is also committing an act of war by closing the Strait of Hormuz. Right. I think it's interesting for people who really care about international law. When a littoral power tries to close a navigable waterway like that and disrupt freedom of the seas, that's a violation of international law. I'd like to know who's protesting what Iran is doing here.
The defense secretary said more than once this week, said that the greatest adversary the U.S. is facing during this war are lawmakers, Democrats largely, a small number of Republicans as well. Do you agree with that? I mean, is that?
No, I think that's embarrassing, actually. No, I think it's embarrassing. I mean, it undercuts Hegseth's whole case. It undercuts the administration's case. I think many of the criticisms from the Democratic side are wrong, including even some criticisms of Hegseth are wrong. But this is not civil discourse, really, on either side of these two hearings today, yesterday and today.
What is the greatest adversary?
Well, the Iranian regime. They're the ones seeking nuclear weapons. They're the ones who are the largest state sponsor of international terrorism. They're the ones who are closing the Strait of Hormuz. I think that's pretty clear.
I also heard the president also said in an interview to Greta Van Susteren that the war is essentially over, which is something he has said before. He just wants a little bit better terms. That doesn't seem to be reality. Is it?
Well, I think it's market manipulation. Everything's fine. They're going to have a deal any time now. Blockade's working great. Everything's fine. Parenthesis, get that price of oil down.
That's what it's about.
I think so. I think this is happy talk to calm the markets down. There was a big spike in oil prices today, and I think he's reacting to it.
If the government is as fractured, if the regime in Iran is as fractured, and certainly there would be understandable why it would be, given the blow that they have taken, do you believe that this is the time to continue military action, not diplomatic action? Is that correct?
Of course, yes. When they're down, keep pressuring them. Now, there are many other things that need to be done that I don't think the administration did before the attack began and don't seem to be doing now to help the Iranian opposition, because that's how, without boots on the ground, and I don't think we're going to see any in any substantial numbers, it's helping the people of Iran, helping the opponents of the regime with resources, weapons, communications, money, to help them make the point inside the country that the regime's days are numbered. As I say, I don't think we're doing any of that. I hope the Israelis are.
The president has continued to say, talking about the importance of Iran not having nuclear weapons. It seemed like for a while the priority was simply get the strait back open. What do you think is the number one priority for the administration right now?
I really have no idea. I mean, it has shifted several times, and I think that helps obscure the finding what the right answer is. I do think it's important to open the Strait of Hormuz. I think it's important to open it militarily, because I think the Iranians need to see that we can reestablish deterrence. They have to understand they can't open and close the strait as they will. Otherwise, if we allow this to go back and be resolved diplomatically, the regime is going to think it can turn the Strait of Hormuz on and off like a light switch, and that's unacceptable.
Tomorrow marks 60 days since the first American strikes on Iranian targets. And sources, both privately and publicly, are saying it's a deadline that matters under U.S. law. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 gives the president 60 days to either get congressional authorization to continue to use military force, or the president should ask for a 30-day extension, but only if he needs that time to withdraw American forces. As we approach 60 days, more than 20 American naval ships are currently patrolling the Middle East. And when you see video of what enforcing that blockade that's in place right now at Iranian ports looks like, keep in mind this law applies to any U.S. forces involved in what is described as, quote, hostilities. Now, the president has not indicated that he's planning to go to Congress tonight. And while not directly addressing the 60 days deadline, he did make clear today how he feels about those repeated attempts by congressional Democrats to rein him in.
They go again and again, the war power. I'm negotiating a deal with Iran. And every week, every 3 days, they put in a thing that the war should stop. And people ask me, how the hell do you negotiate like that? You're destroying them.
But Democrats might not be the president's only problem when it comes to the war in Iran. On Capitol Hill today, the 60-day deadline has even some Republicans putting the White House on notice.
I do not accept that we should engage in open-ended military action without clear direction or accountability. Congress has a role. Congress has to step up and fulfill that role, that obligation that the Constitution assigns to us.
The 60 days is a trigger. After 60 days, in my view, the president has to obtain congressional approval, or Congress can block it. Those are the two choices.
It just can't go on forever. If they don't want to have a discussion about AUMF, then we need to have a discussion about an extension under the War Powers Resolution. That's going to require details.
That's the view from some Republican senators on Capitol Hill today, where Secretary Hegseth, I should note, returned to face more questions from Congress about the war. He offered this legal analysis of the 60-day mark.
On Iran, ultimately, I would defer to the White House and White House counsel on that. However, we are in a ceasefire right now, which our understanding means the 60-day clock pauses or stops in a ceasefire. You're not in. Yeah. It's our understanding, just so you know.
Okay, well, I do not believe the statute would support that.